Welcome to another Sunday evening session with Brian and Janice. I'm so delighted that you all are joining us today. We have an awesome session for you today. I also want to say good evening, YouTube family. We're delighted to bring this segment live to you as well. Also, I just want to tell everybody I'm so thankful that you are joining us today. And we are so fortunate to have such a beautiful, beautiful weekend. And I hope everyone enjoyed this beautiful weather that we're having right now. We got to take this in and take advantage of it. Just absorb the goodness, all the goodness of the beautiful sun, the beautiful air, the beautiful wind. We're just having a great, great weekend. So I hope everybody is doing well. I hope this segment finds you well. And I'm going to encourage you all to tune in and share this message with as many people as you can, because we're going to share an awesome message with you today. Also, I want to encourage those that are tuning in again. Please share this message. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, YouTube family. We are going to be continuing our discussion from last week. We briefly said that we were going to discuss the whole concept and the understanding of America being a racist country. So we want to get into that, and we just kind of want to segue into the discussion by going back, and we were discussing and breaking down on last week our president, Joe Biden, and his presidential address to Congress. And the response to his address was given by Senator Tim Scott, Senator of South Carolina. And one of the comments that he made was that America was not a racist country. Excuse me. And after that, our vice president, Kamala Harris, she came out also and stated that America was not a racist country. And also our president echoed both Kamala and Senator Scott in saying the same thing or making the same comment that America was not a racist country. So we want to discuss that. And of course, we're going to go in our time machine like I always like to do, just to kind of regurgitate history, help us to understand that what we are dealing with, our ancestors have already dealt with.
Yes. And
we need to see how they handled some of the things that we're now dealing with, so that we can have a better grasp of what we need to do as we lead the next generation that's coming behind us. So let's discuss race and racism and Black people, Janice. So,
well, let me ask you this, Brian. When they said America is not a racist country, were they speaking like currently or past?
That's a good question. I think they're referring to the present situation.
Okay.
As it relates to America and as it relates to what is actually taking place with the George Floyd case.
Andrew Brown.
Yes, and Ahmaud Arbery. We can go on and on. Mm-hmm. But I think they're addressing it from a standpoint of looking at some of the gains that Black people have made over the course of the last, let's just say 50 years. Okay. So we look at from the civil rights movement up into this time, looking at some of the gains that Black people have made, whether it be in education, whether it be in business. Some would make the assessment that America is not a racist country now. Maybe it was a racist country, but now in its present state, it's not a racist country. So that's the myth that we kind of want to debunk. And like I said, I think America is more racist now than it was 50 years ago.
I disagree.
Okay, she disagree and well noted.
I totally disagree.
But I'm gonna prove to you that America today is more racist than it was 50 years ago. And I will caveat that by saying this: 50 years ago, the racism was blatant and in the face of our ancestors. Today, it is very much covert and subliminal in its message, and it is very much hidden behind institutions, organizations, and systems that are in place. So it is not as in your face as it once was, but it is very much still there, and it is not progressing. In my opinion, it is regressing. So I'm gonna go to the ancestors and let them speak as it relates to some of these issues that we're trying to deal with as far as race and racism. So first, let me say this. Let me start by reading or quoting from Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois' book, The Souls of Black Folks. And our ancestors said that the great problem facing the 20th century, in his opinion, is that of the color line. Okay? And I just want to read an excerpt from that. Okay? He says, the history of the American Negro is the history of this strife. This longing to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. In this merging, he wishes neither of the older selves to be lost. He would not Africanize America, for America has too much to teach the world and Africa. He would not bleach his Negro soul in a flood of white Americanism, for he knows that the Negro blood has a message for the world. He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American, without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face. This, then, is the end of his striving to be a co-worker in the kingdom of culture, to escape both death and isolation, to husband and use his best powers and his latent genius. Okay, I'm going to stop there with our elder and letting his voice speak to us and saying, in fact, that the problem with America is that they cannot come to grips with the black skin that exists in this America, that is a part of this America, that helped build this America, and yet still has no recognition as being a part of this America, and not only that, has no recognition of being a human being. So Dr. Du Bois makes the case that the great struggle in the 20th century, like I said, is not only that of the color line, but is that of being accepted as a African person living in this America. He says that it is not for us. We were born this way. And I'm just paraphrasing this. We were born this way. We were born with this beautiful skin. So for us to have to change who we are to be accepted by a country that is racist should not be the case. Every human being should be accepted for who they are if they exist in this place that we call America, and they are contributors to the success of this place that we call America. But for the Negro, it hasn't been that way. So Brother Du Bois, in The Souls of Black Folks, he exposes some of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis. So I would ask you, what is race? And then I will ask you, what is racism? What do you feel is racism? And since you made the statement that you disagreed with America being as racist, well, not as racist as it was 50 years ago, today, why would you, why do you feel that way? So if you had to define race, what would you say race is?
Race is one's nationality, color of their skin,
Okay.
their culture, their beliefs. You
Okay.
know, what part of the world they're from.
Okay.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So what? So, and I think that's a fair definition, because I would say that race, and this is my opinion, this is my definition. Race, in its modern terminology, is a construct used to define, label, and categorically divide people based on their skin color. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say race is. Okay? So race to me is a construct whereby it can be used to divide people categorically based on skin pigmentation. That's what race is to me. So racism based off of race. Mm-hmm. So I would say race is actually the child of racism. So racism would be an institutional construct that uses politics, religion, and education to control a group of people based on their social status. Included in that social status may be their skin color. Okay? So I would say that the child of racism is race. So why would I say that? Because the first thing that was implemented prior to there ever being a thing known as race was racism. It was an institution by which the Europeans used to actually subdue and to enculturate and to assimilate a group of people into their politics, into their religion, and into their educational system. And then from that point, they categorically divided those people based on social status. So what does that mean? So when you look at racism, one thing that, like we were saying, that racism includes is the political system, the education. So those are three things that are included: the political system, the education system, and religion. It was those three things that were used to actually assimilate African people into a European and Westernization mode of thinking, acting, living, and being, right?
Yeah.
So it was those three institutions that had to be applied. So racism actually came before race. After that, black people started to be defined as a race as they were divided categorically into a substandard group based on their skin color. Okay? So we'll continue to let the ancestors speak to us. But I thought it was very interesting for Tim Scott to make the comment that America is not a racist country when the whole country was built off of an institutional system based around the race of another people.
Well,
okay?
You know,
or based around the skin color of another people.
I read some excerpts of his history, how he grew up,
mm-hmm.
and with him saying that, I can only say he's speaking to here and now, mm-hmm. because the way he grew up, the challenges that he faced growing up, you know, with with his mom and them having to move in with his grandparents, mm-hmm. and his grandfather instilling, you know, values in them. to help him try to overcome racism, which was very prominent, very open at that time. So for him to say America is not racist, I must say, because of where he has made it, because of where he is now in the political arena and what he has gained from that, he is speaking on the here and now, because his growing up life doesn't show that.
So is he speaking on the here and now, or is he pandering to a political base based off of the support? So if you looked at his history from a standpoint of a child, which his grandfather did instill in him values to fight against racism.
Yes.
Okay.
But he also let him know that you are a black man.
Yeah, but
you know,
yes,
whatever you want, you're gonna have to fight for. You're gonna have to fight twice as hard as the white man.
So basically, what I made, this is my opinion. Basically, what Tim Scott is doing is ignoring the foundation that established him as a black man and to be conscious as it relates to the social status of all black people. So when he makes that statement, it is a general statement that is not consistent with America, is not consistent with the idea of America, because the idea of America, with it being that all men are created equal, the all men portion did not include black people.
No, it did not.
Okay, so that has been well established. Now, what black people have fought for over 400 years since coming to this country is to make themselves part of the all men group. We want to be included in the all men category. So when you say all men are created equal and endowed by their creator and have certain inalienable rights, and that we can follow our dreams based on the pursuit of happiness, all of those things, when we began to look at the Declaration of Independence, we began to look at the Constitution and the preamble, we go back to the fact that we're part of the human created family, and we should be included in the all men category. So that has always been the fight, has been for us more so for human validation in this social construct that was created based on racism, and for us to exist not so much under just a civil context, but for us to exist based on a moral, ethical, social, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Right, as human beings. So this, I think, above all, is what our struggle has always been about in this country, because we've always been marginalized, we've always been debased as a people. So when Tim Scott makes that statement that is America is not a racist country, he could not have been talking about past.
No.
And he cannot be speaking for our present condition as well. He's speaking from, I think, from a political perspective based on his advancements
in society, in the government,
in politics, and he, in the state of South Carolina, we know that Tim Scott have had almost 100% of the white vote.
Yes.
That put him in office on a state level and on a federal level.
Yes.
So he is actually pandering to a base of constituents that says that we accept you as our black, you understand?
Yes.
Token Negro, to speak on our behalf, not on behalf of black people. We did not send you to Washington to speak on behalf of the black people. We sent you to Washington to speak on our behalf.
And you know,
Okay?
Brian, his whole thing is him being a Republican, you know, and what their morals and values are. And the fact that, you know, we know that Republicans, you know, their foundation is based upon Christianity.
But both parties' foundation is based on that.
But Republicans really push that.
Well, they push the conservative idea
of Christianity.
Okay. So conservative, well, let me say this, conservatism is also found in the Democratic Party.
Yes,
okay?
It is.
Because the Democrats are very conservative as it relates to some issues as well.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they are openly against other issues that the Republican Party is more conservative on. Okay? So you have both parties are conservative by nature. The Republican Party is a little bit different because they have different conservative ideas as it relates to certain issues that they want to deal with.
Right.
Say, for instance, abortion. That's a big deal when it comes to the Republican Party as far as being conservative.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's shift it to the Democrat. Democrat Party is more conservative when it comes to gun control and gun rights.
Yes.
Okay, the Second Amendment, things like that. So they're conservative on that level. So what I'm showing you is, like I told you, and we've been saying this, they're two wings
I was about to say that.
on the same bird.
Yeah. Two
Okay?
wings on the same bird.
On the same bird. So they just support
Different issues.
that they believe in as opposed to the Democratic Party.
Yes.
So both parties are conservative in their own right as it relates to what they want to support.
Yes.
Okay? So, but I think that's a good point that you bring out, because one thing that I said that that racism is an institutional construct that uses politics, religion, and education to continue to perpetuate their ideology and belief as it relates to black people. So they continue to impose those three things on us: their politics, their religion, and their education. Okay? They got to rule based on their government, and the only thing that you can do is fit into their government. Okay? You cannot change their government without their approval. Okay? So let's do this. I want to real quick. Now, we're talking about Tim Scott, who's the senator of South Carolina.
Right.
Now, I want to go back to one of our ancestors. In 1871, Robert Brown Elliott. Look him up. Powerful. He is the representative for the state of South Carolina.
Wow.
He stands on the House floor in 1871. He makes his famous speech that Malcolm X actually used an excerpt from his speech. In his famous speech, The Ballot or the Bullet, that actually comes from Robert Brown Elliott's speech in 1871, when he is on the floor debating the fact that the Klan needs to be controlled as it relates to terrorizing black people.
Yes.
And he even goes a step further. He says not only are they terrorizing blacks, but they're terrorizing Republican whites also that support the Republican Party as it relates to slavery and other ideas concerning the opposition of slavery. Okay? So as it relates to an overall theme that we black people are now free. We have now, the Emancipation Proclamation has been signed. We are now free, and we should have every right as any other citizen in this country. So Robert Brown Elliott stands on the floor and he makes the famous word. He makes that famous speech, and in his speech, the words that he says that this should be declared a purpose to defeat the ballot, that the Klan's purpose in oppressing the black vote. He said we should go against that, and we should declare a purpose to defeat the ballot with the bullet and other coercive means. So he, and brothers and sisters, I showed you all this book last week. Very powerful speech. But when we look at the irony here, South Carolina has always been in the crosshairs. Everything starts with South Carolina. When you look at the history of black people in America, South Carolina is probably the most, as far as a state, you understand, the most important state in the lives of black people in America. Everything is centered around South Carolina. Okay, so it's very interesting when we began to look at that history. You understand? So South Carolina, one of the first rebellions, you have the Stonewall Rebellion with South Carolina. You have, from the Stonewall Rebellion, you have the South Carolinians, the black South Carolina, which are your Gully Geechee Nation, actually traveling southward, further southward, in reference to their freedom, seeking freedom. They hook up with the black Indians that are on the coast of Florida. Okay, they actually connect with those Indians, and the Spanish calls them Cimarroons.
Yes.
Okay, they combine the word maroon with semi. Okay, and they call them Cimarroons, which mean half black and half native black, or Indian, or what they would call Indian. That word Cimarroon turns into Seminoles, and we see that they actually fight off. They hold off the American, war machine for over 80 plus years. So South Carolina is that state. The Civil War starts in South Carolina. Okay,
yeah.
So it's one of those states that you cannot discount from our struggle. It is probably, like I said, the most important state in our struggle. So when battles are won in South Carolina, it normally
trickles.
Yes, and it transcends to all the other states and what we are doing as black people. So that's very important. And to look at the difference between the speech that Robert Brown Elliott makes in 1871 against terrorism and the black voter oppression, and then to turn around and look at Tim Scott stand and say that that America is not a racist country, and that black people are all of a sudden we're this free people, we're not oppressed. America is wonderful and great. It's a slap in the face also to his grandfather.
It is.
Okay?
His ancestors,
who was, beaten, spit on, oppressed. It's a slap in the face. So to say that had to be politically motivated and had to be politically based.
So in essence, Brian, Tim Scott, Senator, South Carolina, has he totally forgotten his people? Has he forgotten about his people and the struggles that we are currently facing with policing? Where does he stand on that? Because to make a national statement like that, to say we are not no longer, he doesn't believe that African Americans are being, basically, we're so free that racism doesn't exist, at this time. I want to know, where is he going with that?
All right, that's a good question. Let's connect the dots here. Because throughout history in America, there has always been different points and times in history where senators stand on the floor and they declare that America is not racist. Like, let me give you some of those points and times in history. Okay, so let's go back to the struggle with coming out of slavery. So part of the 1868 Emancipation Proclamation, that was a time where senators were standing on the floor and saying, hey, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, that proves that America is no longer racist. We have freed the slaves, and this should not be considered to be a racist country anymore. 1875, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1875. Then again, you have the Civil Rights Act of 1883. In both of those instances, there's a debate on the House floor. 1871, Robert Brown Elliott, but there were many other men that also stood on that same floor. Black Josiah Walls, black senator, that makes the same, that debates and argue against what the Democratic Party at that time, which was the white nationalist party, says that no, America is no longer racist. We need to move beyond this. We've signed off on, out of the 5 civil rights laws between 1871 and 1875, we signed 2 out of the 5, civil rights laws. So America cannot be a racist country. Okay, so when we move from there, and then of course you have 1919, you have the women's voting rights established in the amendment put in place there as a signification that blacks have rights to vote now, women have rights to vote now, so America is no longer a racist. So and I could continue to show you points in history, but let's get to where we are today. What people are using today, what is being used today politically to say that America is not a racist country anymore is the fact that America has finally, in 400 years, have finally decided to take up a bill or legislation to actually do something about the Ku Klux Klan in blue suits called police. Okay, so, and I know some of my black brothers, I got a cousin that was a police officer, got friends that are state troopers. No, no pun intended. Don't mean to offend them, but that's what it was. It was an established institution, in the majority of its creation was Klanmen were employed as police officers. Okay. Not only that, the Democratic South, the majority of the senators in the state and federally were Klansmen. That's fact. That's not something that I'm just throwing out there to be thrown out there. So now that America is finally having to deal with part of their sins as relates to the patty rollers that we call patrolmen or police officers now, that were employed to run down slaves, to capture slaves, to bring them back to their masters, to imprison during the Jim Crow era, to imprison black men for any and everything. If they look cross-eyed, they could imprison them for nothing, creating a penal system that is still today nothing more than concentration camps and plantations all over again, which black people actually make up 85% of the prison system now. Okay, so when we look at it, America finally decided that we are going to do something about this unruly mob that we have employed since the late 1700s to chase down slaves. So now America cannot be a racist country because we are doing something about the mob in the modern day lynchings called shooting of black men and women.
Wow.
for no reason at all that have been going on for the last 40 to 50 years.
That's right.
Okay?
A lot of them we don't even know about. We hadn't even heard of.
Yes, but we can go back to the 60s and we understand that's why the Deacons of Defense was formed. That's why the Black Panther Party was formed.
That's
I can
exactly
go
right.
on and on with some of the organizations that formed to prevent
right.
the shootings, you know what I'm saying,
Yes.
in black communities by police officers for no reason at all. Those groups were put in place. They were organized to combat that. Okay, so when we look at that and say, and I also have to make when we talk about education, one of those institutions that continue to perpetuate white racism is the institution of education. So when we talk about, we have on our HBCU shirts,
yes.
Okay, purposely wore that for this reason. When we talk about HBCUs, okay, that began to be funded in 1850s, okay, the mid 1850s, when you see one of the first HBCUs established, when you look at these HBCUs, they were established for one reason. And that reason was so that blacks could educate themselves and to keep blacks from attending
white institutions.
That's
right. And that's why George Wallace sat right here in Alabama, at the University of Alabama, sat right there to block the black girl from going into that.
We saw many all over the United States.
Yes, we did.
With white colleges, state-funded colleges, not wanting to allow blacks into their school. So when we see the Moral Land Grants, okay, form of 1875, and some of those 1870, some of those land grants, when you see the second land grant come into place, you see the establishment of the HBCUs, but those HBCUs were established so that blacks could not attend the PWIs, okay? And then not only that, they put people in place that they wanted to teach blacks how to teach other blacks. So they indoctrinated blacks as it relates to their way and their system of education and instruction, so that blacks, in their view, would be or would operate as civilized, normal people in society. That's why a lot of the HBCU schools that started initially were called normal schools.
That's right.
And later names were changed.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? So what were they doing? They were teaching black people to be normal people, because we were considered
what they consider normal.
Right. And we were considered by them still to be chattel. Okay? So now let's further define it, and I want to let our ancestors speak. And this is one of our living ancestors, where we're defining race and racism. This is Dr. Claude Anderson, Powernomics.
Powerful.
Okay,
Powerful.
This is what he says in chapter 1 about race, racism, and wealth. He says, race is about financial, political, and social currencies. It is a form of stored wealth and power. Whiteness has monetary value. Knowing the origin and nature of the value of race is essential to any analysis of Black America's dilemma. It is important that blacks know why the race problem refuses to die and how it is used to keep the non-competitive and powerless group. The word race first appeared with the emergence of the slave practice in the 16th century. Records indicate the word race was selected because the various European slave trading nations were in contest, competing to profit from the mineral and human wealth of Africa. The prize for winning the race was the power to develop Western civilization using the wealth extracted out of Africa. Black people were non-competitors in the race. They were the prizes, so they could neither play nor win. All the competing slave trading nations, religions, and ethnic groups benefited and were advantaged by black slavery. So that's how Dr. Anderson defines race. Now, let me add to what he talks about in the 16th century, that the word race comes into existence and we see the formation of what we know as race being exercised in the 16th century, which was in the early 1500s. So I'm going to go take you back to 1492, 1493. Okay, there is a Spanish explorer by the name of Goncalves. Goncalves goes into Western Saharan Africa. He kidnaps 2 black people, 1 black woman, 1 black man. He takes them back to Prince Henry. As a reward, he takes them back. They establish that these 2 individuals will be servants, not categorically known as slaves back then. Okay? And they worked out terms where the black woman and the black man could actually regain full citizenry in Portugal at this time. Okay? So, what both of the black man and the black woman were Berbers. They were considered Moors, okay? Because they were from Western Saharan Africa, okay? Now, so what the black Moor does is he negotiates with the prince. And he tells him, he says, look, we are intellectuals. We are the, we're the brain behind the trading posts in Africa, behind the learning institutions in Africa. It all stems from who we are as Moors. We are the gatekeepers of the trade routes. We are the gatekeepers of the intellectual properties. We will bring back, this is the negotiation, we will bring back 10 Africans to you as servants if you let us go free, if you take us back to our homeland. They agreed to that. Goncalves agrees to that. He takes them back to Western Sub-Saharan Africa, and they, in the night, go and negotiate with Sub-Saharan Africans for 10 of their young youth.
Wow.
To be offered as gifts to the prince in Portugal. Okay? After this, the Spanish gets involved. After Goncalves comes back with the 10. The Spanish gets involved and wants to honor the Pope and looks at this as a profitable way of honoring the Pope. But now they're also looking at, hold up, if we can get human beings to come and serve and do all of these things, what else do they have? Now they start looking at the resources that they can also bring along with.
From Africa.
From Africa, along with these human beings that they're trafficking. Okay, so that is with Dr. Anderson talking about that. That's the actual start of the race. Okay, for what he terms the race. So the race starts with the Portugals and the Spaniards, or the Portuguese and the Spaniards. Okay, that's where the race starts. Okay, and then it is sanctioned by the Pope, Pope Leo, Pope Alexander. Both give papal bulls, what they call papal bulls or papal edicts at the time, that states that all infidels should be reduced to servitude. And then they actually define infidels based on the theory of blacks being cursed in the Bible as descendants of Ham. And from that grows. Then you come into the 16th century, you have in the 16th century, you have the era of enlightenment. in the era of enlightenment, blacks are being debated whether or not they are human beings.
Wow.
Okay? And then from there you have in the 17th century, after that you have the Great Awakening. And the Great Awakening is missionaries whose job is to actually turn slaves into Christians.
That's right.
Okay? It is to convert the slave. So we have all of these different periods. You understand what I'm saying? That actually go into the making of what we know now as race and racism. Okay, so very interesting, but Dr. Anderson, it really gives us some vital information as it relates to that. And then now let me read you, I read you his definition on race.
Race. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is his definition on racism. It says racism is a wealth and power-based competitive relationship between blacks and non-blacks. The sole purpose of racism is to support and ensure that the white majority and its ethnic subgroups continue to dominate and use blacks as a means to produce wealth and power. This massive inequality in wealth and resources made blacks non-competitive and totally dependent upon whites for the necessities of life. True racism exists only when one group holds a disproportionate share of wealth and power over another group, then uses those resources to marginalize, exploit, exclude, and subordinate the weaker group. In America, it is whites who use wealth and power to marginalize, exploit, and subordinate blacks. Whites can deny blacks employment, educational opportunities, business resources, a place to live, or the right to vote. Therefore, according to this definition, black people cannot be racist. No group of blacks has the power or exclusive control of resources to the degree that they can educationally, politically, economically, and socially exploit and marginalize the white race. Blacks can only react to racism and try to alter the conditions that racism creates. Despite the realities, there are numerous conservative blacks.
Yes.
Okay, here's Tim Scott.
Here's Tim Scott. Okay. That's right.
There are numerous conservative blacks who act as apologists for white racism and confuse the issue. Listen at this now. Tim Scott's, I'm going to put his name in here, desire for white approval as well as his ignorance of history impedes him from understanding that white racism and black prejudice are not the same thing. Blacks have a reason for their feelings about whites based on how they have been treated by whites. The white race, on the other hand, has never been marginalized by the black race. Racism reinforces the legacies of slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery. Okay?
There you have it.
And that is Dr. Claude Anderson.
He's the best.
One of our living ancestors that is still with us that speaks on racism. So we said we're going to let the ancestors speak to us today. So and now, do you have any other questions? And I'm going to read something from Brother Eddie, Brother Claude, and he's powerful too. And I want everybody to get these books that we're showing. If you don't have them, family, you got to get the books and read them. It's just an amount of wealth in these books that helps you to understand the dynamic of what's happening today. Okay. So I don't know if I'm proving that America is still a racist country, but this book is Democracy in Black: How Race Still Enslaves the Soul of America, and it's by Eddie S. Glaude Jr. All right, powerful brother. Is
he still living?
He is still living. He is actually a professor, and I think he is a professor at Princeton.
Awesome.
But y'all fact check me on that. But Brother Glaude is good. But let me read what he says about this same issue. He says, throughout American history, as we have struggled with the issue of race, the particular circumstances of black lives have been hidden by the illusion that white America has adequately addressed the Negro problem. We have a long history of prematurely proclaiming that our race problems are long over. In the years following the Civil War and Reconstruction, for example, many white Americans lauded the end of the race problem in this country, just as Jim Crow took shape in the South. The Supreme Court in the civil rights cases of 1883 declared the Civil Rights Act of 1875 unconstitutional. Slavery had been over for almost 20 years, and the justices cautioned that black people needed to finally stand on their own without the help of the government, despite crippling poverty, daily violence, and the ascendance of Jim Crow. Does that not sound like today?
Come on, that's today.
All right, now listen. Right. He says the fact that black people were subject to continued racial discrimination did not warrant unique consideration according to the court. The issue of slavery had been settled. Neither the 13th nor the 14th Amendment gave Congress the power to restrict racial discrimination in the private sector. Black people were now, like everyone else, tragically, more than 2,000 black people were lynched in the United States between 1882 and 1903. Didn't matter, the problem had been solved. This is what they said. The illusion that we've solved our race problem often leads to harsh judgments about black people, continued demands for racial equality to acts of extortion by people who don't want to take responsibility for themselves. Since the 1980s and the advent of the Reagan Revolution, the majority of Americans tend to see racial inequality, if they acknowledge it exists at all, as the fault of black people. White America is saying that what we're dealing with today is
our fault.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Too many black folk have failed to take advantage, this is what they say, of the successes of the civil rights movement, the argument goes. Oh, you should be taking advantage. Now the civil rights laws don't apply to black people anymore.
They refer to immigrants and others.
They are majority support the diversity movement now.
That's right.
Okay. Now, see, the question has to be raised. Why is it that every time race is brought up, black people have to be included with brown people and yellow people? Why is it that black people cannot deal with the issues based on themselves as black people? Why is it that every time race comes up, blacks now have to be included with the brown and the colored people? You know why?
Why?
Because America doesn't want to deal with the fact that they owe retribution to the descendants of the slaves that built this country. See, yes, you had some brown people involved in the building of this country.
Yes, you did.
But the foundation was the black American slave. Why do they want to continue? And I say this every time. Why do they want to continue to mix the black race? It is so that they will not have to recompense the black people.
And not have to pay reparations.
That's what recompense is. So what we're dealing with is a system that wants to blot you out of the history of America. So whenever race is discussed, black alone cannot discuss their issues. So you cannot expose the sins of America because black alone exposes the sins of America. Brown and colored in diverse groups don't expose the sins of America.
No,
all that does is deal with social issues. So the civil rights laws have been turned into social laws to deal with nothing but diversity, colored, brown people. It will not, it never has really, since its inception, dealt with the problems of black people. So we have the argument being made by Malcolm and some of our other leaders at that time that integration did nothing but hurt us. Instead of integrating us, they should have desegregated us and kept us and made the mandate should have been equality. And I do not believe, with everything I've read about Dr. King, I do not believe that he promoted the agenda of a full integrated society that would somehow destroy black wealth, destroy black communities, destroy black education, destroy, you see what I'm saying? Right. All of those institutions that our ancestors had worked so hard to build, overnight, the civil rights laws based on an integrated interracial society destroyed that. So we have to get back, I think, to that place to where we began to look at what is democracy again, and we have to look at it in black. We can't look at it in terms of brown people and colored people. So see, when Kamala Harris stands up, she stands up as a brown person. Yes, and I hate to burst y'all bubble. She don't stand up as a black person.
Well, they all see that now.
Okay. Kamala Harris, when she made the statement that she supports Tim Scott, she agrees with Tim Scott that America is not racist, told me one thing. She had never had the experience of a black person. You understand?
That's right.
And the little white lie that she told about her bus experience as a little girl, and when she attacked Joe Biden when they were running, and they were both candidates bidding for the nomination, she makes it seem like, oh, she was so enthralled in the civil rights movement and her parents, and they were not. So when she speaks, she doesn't identify with the black population. She identifies with the brown population. And the brown population are Hispanics, Asians, Indians. Blacks are not included in the brown population. If you all have not figured that out yet, blacks are not included in the brown population. Even though your skin is brown, if you are not Hispanic, if you are not Asian, if you are not Indian, you are not brown, regardless of what your skin tone is. You are black, and you are not included in that conversation. So see, that's why they do not want to deal with racism based on black people identifying themselves as black and standing up and saying, no, we do not have the same experience in this country as brown people. Now you've got to look at, see, the reason that the anti-racist laws after the massage parlor shootings.
Right. With the Asians.
Within less than a month,
yes,
anti-Asian legislation was put in place. But nobody is talking about the Asian population and their anti-black campaigns. You understand? Asians are considered to be, Asians hate black people just as much as white people. I was looking at the percentage as it relates to what Asians think about black. Over 85% of Asians hate black people.
Wow.
Nobody is talking about that. So while we out there marching with the Asians, and nothing against Asian people, what I'm trying to address is we need to stop trying to support everybody else when nobody supports us.
I second that one.
Okay.
That's it.
Asians do not support blacks. And I have not seen one Asian, if they're standing with the Black Lives Matter movement, they're standing with the diversity movement.
Exactly.
Black Lives Matter is not dealing with black people anymore specifically. Black Lives Matter is dealing with, like they say now, brown people, yellow people, gay people, trans people. That's who they're dealing with.
Diversity.
They are not dealing with black people solely anymore. So when you see the Asians collaborating with Black Lives Matter movement and showing up at these protests, it's because Black Lives Matter are representing the Asians.
Well, the Asians had their protests this weekend or Friday, where they were marching for anti-Asian.
Absolutely.
You know. But I didn't see any blacks marching with them.
I've seen many blacks with the Asians, and that have come out and that are protesting with the Asians. So what I'm saying is, we get so focused, and it just goes to show you what a number was done on us as it relates to the assimilation with these three institutions, and how white people literally brainwashed us into a behavior that is not conducive to the advancement of our race. It is conducive to the advancement of everybody else, while at the same time continuing. Here's it, and this is the thing: we as black people are playing into our own demise.
Wow.
See, and there was one other book that I wanted to read.
Keep going with that statement.
Yes, okay. But so what am I saying? Let me give you an example. We can work along a white person, work alongside a white person. Okay, we could have white neighbors, all around us. We can go to school with white people. All of us have. You understand? Either at some point, because of the civil rights laws and because of integration into the school system. So all of those things, yes, those are things that we have participated in by way of legislation being changed, by way of legislation being implemented. Okay, here's the problem. When we get into those circles and we find those friends that are of the other persuasion, we will love them above our own. We will accept them above our own. There's a word that is misused, abused, and overused in our community, and it is called love. We love everybody but ourselves. That is a part of the conditioning based on one of the institutions called religion. Nothing wrong with loving, but when loving becomes a habitual emotion that is attached to everybody and everything, it now bears no significance and no cultural meaning anymore amongst the people. So that's why you are taught to love those that hate you, misuse you, say all manner of things about you, call you any type of thing, but yet you are taught to love them. And we so hypothetically tell them, love you, we'll do anything for them when they won't pick up. Don't be confused. What the brother said in the book, what Brother Anderson said, is said that black people get confused. See, I don't have to agree with every black brother out there. I don't have to agree with every black sister out there. But one thing that you'll never get me to do is to accept my oppressor over that black brother or sister, whether I agree with them or not. I will not give the liberty to my oppressor. I will not give them the satisfaction
Big Brian.
of thinking that I'm against my own in preference to them.
No.
You understand? But we have black people that do that every day. Why? Because they are confused about race. They are confused about racism. They don't understand it. They don't try to understand it. They don't understand history. And one thing, believe me, that no white person, I don't care how close they are to you, is going to accept you or love you over their own. They will always, in any other culture, that is called code of ethics within the culture. No culture loves another culture of people over their own except blacks. And that is a conditional problem that we have been integrated and assimilated and enculturated into, to where there's nothing that we can hold on to that we say is our own. And when you don't have nothing that's your own, then unfortunately your people they're just as minimized in your own sight, in your own mind, in your own thought process. So we have to deal with this. Race, racism, and black people needs to be discussed more, because we have not yet, as a black people, come to the understanding of what racism was designed for and how it has affected us over these last 600 plus years. When you go back to the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. Okay, so I'm going to end there.
Yes.
I want you all to get this book too. This is by Brother France Fanon. Black Skin, White Mask. I think I showed you this before. He makes the argument in chapter 5 of this book that black people were considered to be objects. We were not considered to be human beings. And anytime you consider to be an object, you are throwaway. You bear no significance in society. You have no place in citizenry. You are simply a menace. Like the movie with Brother Tupac.
Menace to society.
Menace to society. That's what you are considered to be. Brother Fanon says we have been objects in the eyes of Europeans for centuries. And it's not until we gather ourselves and understand that we are more than that. We are human beings. We are the first people to be created. Till we get back to those things, we're going to simply be chasing our tails.
That's right.
And I agree with Ancestor, Brother Du Bois, that the problem in the 21st century is that of the color line. And we're done.
And we're done. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Words from Ron and from our ancestors. Thank you guys for joining us today. It's been a delight. We welcome you for any questions or comments. You can inbox those to us, and Brian will be more than happy to respond to those. So with that being said, we love you guys and have a wonderful week.